So here we are, almost halfway through the year, halfway through 2024. And I imagine for you, like for me, the first half has been a lot. And I so often say, when I'm teaching, this moment conditions the next. And so what's in this moment for me and what's in this moment for you and all of us? Where are we headed and where do we want to go? And what have we learned about ourselves in this time, our lives in this year, as parts of different systems and communities and as individuals? So one of my favorite teachers, Ayakema, writes about how life is an adult education school. I'll touch on that a little later. And we get schooled a lot by life. And I don't need to run down a list, of what has happened in the last 12 months. But for all of us, it's been a lot. And so I just kind of want to take stock of that. And, this year is no longer young. And for me, the first 5 months have kind of felt incredibly rich and full and busy and challenging and joyful and difficult at times. And I'm sort of at a place where I feel like I can let out and exhale and slow down a little bit and see where I am, to take stock and notice the contents of this moment. Like I said, this moment conditions the next. And I say that a lot because how I receive this moment, the views that I hold about it, my tendencies to want to hang on to or push away this moment, conditions how I respond to the moment, how I act in the next moment, whether I act consciously or unconsciously, wisely or unwisely, with kindness or with aversion. So what's in this moment for me, for you, and how are we relating to it? Are we headed where we want to go? What have we learned about ourselves during this time, this year, and this life? So true wisdom is wisdom that's born of experience and understanding, what we call in the Buddhist teachings wise view. And it doesn't come without an understanding of suffering or discontent or pain in the world. And it doesn't come cheaply. It's actually our greatest wealth. So we don't know what will unfold or when or how, but can we bring along with us the wisdom, this wisdom of wise view that is hard won? And can I let go of what is inappropriate, what is mere opinion, what is dominant cultural conditioning that isn't based on truth, isn't based on wisdom? Unwise view. And we can have views about anything. I remember heading out on a long walk one morning, an early one to avoid the heat, and so it included a sunrise view. And the clouds looked like feathers, and the sun was just beginning to light them up. And I noticed having a preference, a thought that I wanted it to be a bright neon sort of sunrise because I'd just gotten a new phone. And there I was, waiting and hoping it would be a certain way, a certain color, so that I could take this great picture of it. I had an idea, a view of how it should look. And is that what happened? No. The appearance of the sky unfolded according to causes and conditions of the atmosphere that morning, and not according to my preferences, my wishes, my ideas of what a great sunrise should be. And when I saw this, it kind of made me smile that, wow, I can even have an opinion about how the sky should color in the morning. And so, of course, that's an easy one to let go of. I could see, okay, here's an attachment to view, no pun intended. And of course, I dropped that, and then I could appreciate the perfect unfolding of the sky in its own way, in its own time. And that's a pretty harmless example of view with a small v, but if I can hold a view on the sunrise and how it should look, you better believe I can hold a lot of other views. Views of how I should be or how I should not be, how I should look or not look, what I should have or not have or achieve or not. And of course then how you should be and how someone else should be and how those people over there should be. And I cling to those kind of views with a lot more craving and aversion and delusion than I did to that sunrise view. And I do that even when holding on to those kind of views causes suffering and separation and friction. So what is freedom? Freedom has a lot to do with our minds and the views that we hold or let go of, and the wise view that we develop that helps us discern and disentangle. So a friend of mine who is an artist with a large studio talked one time about how he just knows that every once in a while he absolutely has to clear up the accumulation of stuff in his studio, the beginnings of projects, the things that get cast off, the messes, to just clear off the surfaces. And for him, clearing off the surfaces is his way of making space and inviting whatever is to come, without knowing what that is necessarily. But for him, the clearing is a condition for the free arising of whatever it needs to be. And so that feels very important to me right now, making space, clearing away what is cluttered, tangled, no longer needed. And I'm talking mostly internally. And then inviting in the creativity of life to unfold. And as I thought about this analogy, I realized that part of what resonates for me about it is the sense of not knowing what is coming, not knowing what will unfold, not holding what the Buddha called fixed views about how it should be. And that's not the same as not caring or aimlessness or not having intentions or wholesome wishes. It's setting the stage, clearing the table, putting down the picnic blanket to see what life is serving, rather than thinking it's going to be this way, it's got to be this way, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z every day, rather than creating sweeping resolutions or a big to-do list. It's just making space for life and making space for ourselves to receive life, rather than fixed ideas about how things must or ought to be. Can I create space, openness for what life is actually bringing? So in the beginning of the meditation, I said, may I meet this moment fully. May I meet it as a friend, this lovely verse. And when we meet a friend, usually we try and meet them as they are, accepting them for themselves. We usually don't try and mold our friends into what we want them to be or how they should be. We try and welcome them as they are. That's friendship. Can I meet my own life in this way? Can I meet life as I would a good friend? And what would it take to do that? Is there a letting go or a cleaning off of the table that I can do? So the Buddha sometimes spoke of the thicket of views, and I like that word thicket because that's how views are sometimes. Thick, tangled, dense, hard to get through, like someplace you might easily get caught. I can kind of feel the thorns of views catching my sleeves or my jeans. And the kind of views that the Buddha is talking about here are the kind of views and worldly opinions that, we mistake for truth, that separate us from each other, that are unkind, divisive, deluded, that come from this limited viewpoint of I, me, and mine, a sense of righteousness, a sense of separation from others. I'm right, you're wrong. This tendency toward rigidity of view and clinging rather than flexibility, suppleness, holding on rather than opening. And these are views that aren't wise in the sense that they increase rather than reduce suffering. They aren't in line with the Four Noble Truths, which I'll touch on in a minute. And it's really easy to get carried away by these views. I do all the time. I get pulled away from center. And this is why I practice, because I need to come back to center, to come back to stillness, to source, to remember. And this culture that we're in seeks to pull us every which way, mostly by appealing to fear, greed, and fantasy. And one of my best tools for coming back is what I call the practice of putting your feet down. And it's not like putting your foot down as in no more. Instead, it's noticing where I am carried away, when I'm pulled away from my intentions of letting go, compassion and kindness, pulled away from my deepest wisdom. So I love to snorkel, and some of my happiest memories have been when I've been out in the water, under the water, and it feels like meditation, quiet and focused and intimate. And maybe 20 years ago or so, I was snorkeling in this beautiful bay and really enjoying myself. But I got towards the mouth of the bay as the tide was going out, and the water started getting really rough, and it began to rain and was getting windy, and I was being pulled out toward the open water. And even wearing flippers, I wasn't able to resist the pull. And I was worried because I was close to very sharp rocks, a reef, covered in barnacles, and salt water was splashing in at the top of my snorkel. And I was feeling kind of out of control. And I started to panic a little bit. And then the thought just came to me, put your feet down. Oh, yeah. Put your feet down. And the water was just the right depth so that I could stand and calm myself and figure out what I needed to do to get to safety. But there was that first message of wisdom, just put your feet down. So what is that ground that can support us in an ever-changing, ever-shifting world? When I was snorkeling, it was a kind of wisdom that cut through the chatter of fear, and it's wise view as opposed to that thicket of views. Wise view, wisdom that we can count on, and we can develop it through our own practice. It's the only true wealth that we can earn and hold on to. So wise is used by the Buddha in terms of what practices or actions are effective in reducing suffering and separation, because that's what the Buddha was interested in, not the speculative views of his time. And it was a really rich philosophical time when the Buddha lived, and lots of ideas and opposing ideas, and he refused to be drawn into the arguments. It's either this or this. But he was more interested, and said often he was actually interested in what leads to less suffering in life, less personal and less relational suffering, and ultimately to true freedom. So this thing we call wise view is the foundation and the culmination of the path of practice, the Eightfold Path. Wise view, wise intention, wise speech, action, livelihood, wise effort, mindfulness and concentration. And in the Buddha's teaching, he answers this question. And what, monks, is wise view? It is the knowledge of dukkha, or suffering or unsatisfactoriness that we experience in life, the knowledge of the origin of dukkha, the knowledge of the cessation of dukkha, and the knowledge of the way of practice leading to the cessation of dukkha. This is called wise view. So it's kind of seeing what is going on, how suffering arises, what feeds it, that it can cease, and the way, the path of practice that leads to freedom. And wise view is that first step. It's that orientation to the path. It's where we begin and it's where we culminate. And it's like a spiral. We do it again and again. The more wise view we have, the deeper we go in our practice, the more wisdom we develop, the deeper and wiser our view, until we become completely free. And it's a sort of coming to terms with belonging to the unfolding of life, rather than the idea that everything should or even could conform to our wishes. It's a maturation of view that knows the pains of life and how we add to them through our clinging and aversion, and understands where we do and don't have agency. There's a ton of unwise views, or said another way, views that aren't helpful, that don't lead us toward freedom or joy. And I bet each one of us could sit down right now and make a list of our own top 10 unwise views. Whatever takes us away from our own inherent goodness and recognition of that, from the inherent goodness of others, from kindness and connection, all of that is unwise view. There's no judgment in saying that, it just doesn't help. The thinking and clinging that comes from that I, me, and mine position, the thinking that limits and separates self and others, that says that there isn't enough, that says that I am not enough, or you are not enough, or if I could just get and hang on to this thing forever, I would be happy. This clinging to the unclingable that we do. Unclingable because it's constantly changing. Not seeing clearly the way that clinging to the unclingable results in suffering and pain and unsatisfactoriness. And it's so easy to be caught and snared by views. Most of the time we aren't even conscious of them. And a lot of them are programmed into us by the culture that we live in, unless we start questioning it. Even in the Dharma, this is true. The human mind has this evolutionary bias to look for the flaw, the problem, often finding problems where there are none, or obsessing on small details, small differences, that in the scheme of things don't really matter. And we see this all the time. And it happens with the Buddhist teachings. There's no absolute way that the Dharma should be presented, and you'll notice the differences in the way different teachers at ICD present the Dharma. The Buddha pointed out that he himself presented the Dharma in different ways at different times, depending on who he was teaching. And so he cautioned his followers not to adhere to one particular presentation of the Dharma and then to argue and quarrel with others who base themselves on other presentations. And instead he invited us to regard each other with kindly eyes, like milk and water mixing. And of course, seeing for ourselves. Dharma talks and books and articles from different traditions and teachers are a wonderful starting place for wise view, an orientation toward wise view. And then we get to work it out for ourselves through the practice of the path. There is a view, and then we get to test that view. There is what is truly seen and known for ourselves. that can only be experienced, that can only be known through our own practice. Our words and concepts and even perceptions are incomplete. This is why the Buddha said, in whatever way you conceive of an object, it is other than that. So I don't have my phone, but if you took out your phone and started taking selfies of yourself from all different angles, which one depicts the real you? I guess selfies of yourself was redundant, but so you take all these pictures. Which one is you? Is it any of them, or is it all of them? One picture or 50 pictures can't really express what a person is, what an individual is. However we conceive of an object, it is other than that. And so the Dharma doesn't say you must believe this way or that way, but it asks you to keep an open mind and be willing to investigate what is here for yourself through this lens of shamatha, calmness, stillness. It's this investigation with a heart, mind that's supported by gatheredness, practice, mindfulness, and an openness to seeing how it is now with fresh eyes, this actual moment, rather than the moment filtered through opinions and worldly views. Yesterday, at our half day, we were doing walking meditation, and during that period, I experienced again the wonder of receiving this moment without words. And words are so often full of views or signify views. And it's such an amazing experience to let the world unfold as it is without my overlay of views. We go beyond views to simply what is, to what is seen, to what is heard, to what is sensed. So there's a Tibetan Lama of a couple hundred years ago named Chukyi Trungpa, and he taught this amongst many other things, of course, but he wrote, "If you have not acquired inner experience, nor fully clarified the view through meditation, you will not manage to do so through philosophical debates or just by reading. Meditate continually. That is my advice from the heart." And so meditate continually doesn't mean sit in a lotus position until your knees petrify and crack. It means meet your life, this life, as a friend. Meet it with all the friendliness, acceptance, and attention that you can. So what have we learned so far this year? What have you learned? Where have you touched suffering, penetrated and understood? And where have you touched joy and well-being that isn't dependent on external conditions but comes from within? So there's someone I follow on Twitter who goes by the name Exploding Unicorn. I just changed my sound. I realized I had the wrong sound setting, so I hope it didn't get vastly louder. So I think his name is James Breakwell, but he goes by Exploding Unicorn. And he writes about, among other things, the interesting conversations that he has with his daughters. And one of the tweets went like this. And 6-year-old says to him, "Today is a good day." And he asks her, "Why?" And she says, "Because I decided it is." And his comment was, "She gets it." So wise view is understanding suffering for ourselves, how it arises and how it ceases. And like that little girl, knowing how we can participate in that. You know, the great teacher and nun, the Venerable Ayakema, that I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, said we could react to suffering in a variety of ways. We can blame someone else. We can get overtaken by our suffering and stuck in it. We can suppress it. And then she writes, there's another method, and that is looking suffering squarely in the face and saying, aha, my old friend's here again. What am I supposed to learn this time? That is right view, she writes, that we have really understood, then we have really understood why the human realm is the best realm for enlightenment. If we don't pass the subjects, we just have to sit the examination again. Whatever lesson we have missed, we'll get it again. That's why we find ourselves reacting to similar situation in similar ways many times. However, a time does come when we notice this, and the right view arises. I've got to do something about myself. I'm having the same problem over and over again. So that's not to say that there aren't actions that others take, conscious or unconscious, and that there aren't systems of oppression that are harmful and that have to be resisted and changed. Every targeted group knows that, and everyone who works for justice and progress knows that. But how can I steward my inner world? How can I approach, how can I live with the conditions in my life that are changing quickly, those that are changing slowly, and those that seem not to change at all? Where can I put my feet down in this particular rolling sea? So the invitation today is a process of remembering our own ground, the wisdom that is our greatest wealth and our foundation, the wise view that is born from our own lived experience and awareness of that experience, clearly seen, of how suffering arises and how it ceases, how freedom arises. And to clear off the table, to notice the little views, the opinions, the notions that don't line up with our wisest view, and to let them go. And then to relate to whatever is unfolding, positive or negative, through the lens of wise view. In other words, the Four Noble Truths. So I would not invite you, the Buddha said, to abandon the unwholesome energies if I thought you could not abandon them. But because I know you are able to abandon them, I invite you to abandon the unwholesome energies. I would not invite you to cultivate the wholesome energies if I thought you were not able to cultivate the wholesome energies. But because I know you are able to cultivate them, I invite you to cultivate the wholesome energies. So that's wise effort right there. And that is our practice. And this is where we start today. And this is where we start every day. So I'd like to just invite us to maybe take 5 minutes to just settle into stillness and let the words settle. And maybe just reflecting for a moment where you are right now, how this year has been for you. And just noticing, is this a good time to clean the surfaces? Is this a good time to put your feet down and touch solid ground? And maybe dropping in the question and seeing what bubbles up. What might you toss or put away for right now so that there is room for life to unfold? Are there views that I hold or that seem to hold me that I would like to release or that I'm ready to release? Maybe just noticing or thinking of one limiting view that you're ready to release. And maybe noticing if there's an energy or intention that wants to be supported, that wants to be given space to unfold in your heart and your life. what came up, if anything, or anything you'd like to share or ask. The floor is yours. You can unmute yourself if you'd like to, or raise your hand and I can do it for you. Okay. So we'll close, and I want to thank you really from my heart for being here today and sharing and supporting the sangha and each other. And I have a poem to close with, and it's a little silly and cute, but you know, I sometimes that goes with grief. I've noticed sometimes, like when I'm really grieving, it's like 1 minute I'm like this, and the next minute I'm laughing about something, and it comes in waves. So here's kind of a silly yet profound wave, and I just need to find this poem. Okay, so this is by Brad Aaron Maudlin, and it's called What You Missed That Day You Were Absent from Fourth Grade. Mrs. Nelson explained how to stand still and listen to the wind, how to find meaning in pumping gas, how peeling potatoes can be a form of prayer. She took questions on how not to feel lost in the dark. After lunch, she distributed worksheets that covered ways to remember your grandfather's voice. Then the class discussed falling asleep without feeling you'd forgotten to do something else, something important, and how to believe that the house you wake up in is your home. This prompted Mrs. Nelson to draw a chalkboard diagram detailing how to chant the Psalms during cigarette breaks, and how not to squirm for sound when your own thoughts are all you hear. Also, that you have enough. The English lesson was that I am is a complete sentence. And just before the afternoon bell, she made the math equation look easy, the one that proves that hundreds of questions and feeling cold and all those nights spent looking for whatever it was you lost and one person add up to something. Okay, dear friends, thank you for your practice and care, and may you have a beautiful week with lots of joy. Okay, and hope to see you soon. Take care.